So, this is the exciting new project I've been cooking up ever since the last time I did something Silent Hill related. My video editor fucked up and I basically lost a good chunk of work that I put a considerable amount of time into, editing, researching and all that kind of stuff, and basically it all went down the pisser. And it was after watching Roger Van De Weide's Sonic Dissected videos that I got an idea which can be easily summarized as, hey, what if I did Roger Van De Weide's Sonic Dissected idea, except instead it's me, and it's about Silent Hill. Genius! And boom, Silent Hill Dissected was born. However, unlike Sonic Dissected, well, outside of the obvious differences, there are a few stylistic things that sever the two from being symmetrical to one another. For one thing, I'm absolutely shit at animation and drawing, so it's unlikely that you'll ever be seeing some amusing parody animations from me. My live-action incarnation, as I'm sure many would comment on, is rather disgusting and hideous to look at, so to ensure that my disgusting flesh doesn't leave you all with mental scars that'll never heal, I'll mostly be sticking to gameplay footage or the adorable little anime incarnation of myself drawn by my good buddy Tamimi. Another difference is that, unlike my usual videos where I tend to script what I have to say, in this series in particular it's a little bit of a mishmash between scripted stuff and a little bit of ad-libbing that I'm going to talk about, delivered in a way in which I can easily go off the beaten path, while also not really having to worry and constantly self-edit my lackluster tongue whenever reading something because it just like right there actually, whenever it fails to comprehend the English language. Anyway, cursory bullshit aside, welcome to Silent Hill Dissected, the successor to the Silent Hill Creature feature, where instead of analysing purely the creatures of Silent Hill, I will instead be dissecting each game in the series and finding out what makes it tick. But don't get it twisted. This isn't a review show, and thus this isn't the place where I'm going to cast judgment on each game, so if you're hoping that this is going to be another one of those bash fests where I bash the evil Tom Hewlett era, or piss and moan about Konami, then I think it's best that you take your business elsewhere. Plenty of other inferior Silent Hill related channels, I'm not gonna name names here, but one of them begins with Twin Perfect. They've already done this kind of thing, and again, the whole snarky, angry reviewer, or alternatively the sarcastic hipster shticks are already pretty sucked dry and kinda derivative to me, really, so I think something like this would make for a nice change of pace to see someone who does genuinely enjoy the series to share the love, and maybe even uncover some of the aspects that some fans might not have ever seen before. But what this ultimately means is that I'm going to be taking a look at each Silent Hill game from the very first game up until Silent Hill Downpour, and take a look at how it makes it tick, what makes it stand out on its own, and why exactly each game is as loved or hated as it is by fans by virtue of its contents and themes portrayed within the game itself. So strap yourselves in for a Silent Hill Saturday, as we're going to see whether or not this series takes off, or crashes and burns. Let's take a look at Silent Hill Dissected, Episode 1, Scene 2, Act 3, Scene 4. Silent Hill 1. Silent Hill 1. The game that started it all. A game which in 1999 was either seen as the scariest game ever made, or nothing more than a shameless Resident Evil clone. Of course, anybody who thought that it was nothing more than a Resident Evil ripoff would be sadly mistaken given the obvious canyon between Resident Evil's science fiction-inspired horror versus Silent Hill's more supernatural motifs, but nonetheless, what we're here to dissect today is why Silent Hill stood out among games of 1999, and why to this very day it hasn't lost any of its horror zest. Given the amount of snarky internet critics who would so easily criticize games like Resident Evil for aging poorly with their use of tank controls and shoddy voice acting, Silent Hill manages to escape this for the most part by virtue of its method of horror, fear of the unknown. The very idea that the player is unaware of what's attacking them, why it wants to kill them, or more importantly, any fathomable idea of what might be lurking beyond our perceptions is a very fantastic veil to derive horror from. Vagaries of perception blurring the line between reality and fantasy, conjuring up images to mind that give limitless potential to a creator to mold a world to how they see fit. Not only that, but they can also twist and contextualize the world in the very plane of existence that you see throughout the form of fiction. This is a choice that I feel benefited Silent Hill in the long run in the sense that fear of the unknown holds a primal fear that allows the mind to wander a little bit too far into believing that what they see in Silent Hill might actually be lurking in the shadows long after the PlayStation has been switched off. Of course, the more rational part of our brains tells us that there's nothing to be afraid of and that what happened in the game is not real, but after playing Silent Hill for the first time, there always was a part of my mind that felt a little bit unsettled whenever I heard a slight noise, whether it be the sound of walls cracking, or the dissonant knocking, even on the odd occasion just looking over my shoulder to see if something was behind me. And unlike later games where we came to understand where Silent Hill derived its power from, in the first game we had very little idea of what was happening to the town, and even less so if you didn't bother to watch up on the expanded material in the first game, such as Poltergeist or hormonal teenage girls who are powerful enough to create conduits for psychic energy. In essence, what makes Silent Hill 1 stand out among its peers outside of being the first game in the series is how you're submerged into a world that you don't understand, being thrust into a situation where you were never even factored into the mix, and even when you are factored into things, you later find out that you were being manipulated all along. As I mentioned earlier, what Silent Hill has to its strength, especially on the first time player, is its vagueness, in regards to how you have no knowledge of what's actually going on in the game. Our story begins simple enough. You're a single father who loses his daughter in a resort town, and now he must run off to save her, hoping to God that she wasn't consumed by the revolting monsters that lurk within the town. But as the story progresses, we soon come across more pieces of the puzzle. Who is this mysterious girl? How does this hospital director tie into all this? Why is this nurse the only one left in the hospital? And what the hell is gyromancy? All of these questions are presented to the player, and it's up to them to find any scrap of information they can to piece together what happened in Silent Hill over 7 years ago. And despite the claim that Silent Hill 1 is open to interpretation, if you look hard enough, it really isn't, because the information present in the game already does give definite answers as to what happened. However, it's up to the player's interpretation and imperative to gather all this information and derive its context based upon the events in the story. But this is all likely lost on the first time player, which is why a lot of the alternative endings serve to act as an incentive to replay the game again, and to witness the game's events in a new light as you finally see the context of the situation as it was truly meant to be seen. And our context in this case is the focal point of this game's main theme. Silent Hill's plot is centered around sacrifice in more ways than one might think. To start off with what most would already know, Alessa Gillespie, aged 7, was sacrificed in a ritual where she would bear eternal pain and suffering as she was set to give birth to a physical incarnation of God, who the cult worshipped and desired to bring the Almighty to rain down destruction upon the earth, to cleanse the world of the heathens and open up a path to paradise on a cleansed earth. And already, with even this much, we already have sacrifice in 3 scenarios. The first of which being the obvious, which is Alessa's sacrifice in being the Mother of God. The second sacrifice is of course her mother Dahlia, and the cult's sacrifice in the ritual, plus the 7 years spent in limbo as she tried to hunt down Alessa's incorporeal form. And lastly, the final form of sacrifice is the plan that was meant to cleanse the earth of millions for the sake of a foolish dream for heavenly paradise. But it doesn't just stop there, however. There are more examples of sacrifice playing a huge role into the context of the game, namely with Harry Mason and his daughter Cheryl. Throughout the game, we see Harry's one goal being to find his daughter Cheryl and keep her safe. A single-minded goal that he never once wavers from out of preference of I'm getting the fuck out of here. And of course in the end we find out that Cheryl was in fact the other half of Alessa's soul, now having returned to her corporeal body to complete the ritual as the incubator. But in turn, what happens as a result of this is that we see a new version of Alessa that Harry knew with Cheryl consumed by the source to become whole again. It's only then that we see as a parting gift to Harry, he's given a new incarnation of Alessa that would make up for his lost Cheryl. Putting it simply, Harry's daughter was sacrificed so that Alessa could complete her plan and fulfill in and of itself another sacrifice of her own. What Alessa plotted to do was, now that she had the other half of her soul free from her physical body, she could use Cheryl to create the Seal of Metatron to seal Silent Hill away from the world and shroud it in darkness and effectively trap the cult there so that the world would never know the wrath of God. A sacrifice in a more heroic sense, so to speak. But Alessa's plight is only half the tale. In even smaller ways, like with Lisa Garland slowly coming to the realization that she's no different from the puppet nurses that she once feared roaming around the hospital. In a way, this could also be seen as a sacrifice in her humanity, culminating in how Alessa herself did more damage to Lisa with an open hand than a closed fist, despite the kind intent behind it. And the last bit of icing on the cake is Sybil Bennett, whose outcome is invariably determined upon whether or not the player's choice is there to kill Sybil, or to save yourself in a crapshoot by using the Aglophidus to repel the parasite out of her back. But either way you spin it, a sacrifice must be made. And if the supposed canon ending is anything to go by, then it seems that Sybil's death only serves to further strengthen the theme of sacrifice, which makes it that much more obvious. Not only that, but sacrifice is also key to most of, if not all, the direct casts that we meet throughout the game. Dr. Kaufman, the drug dealer whose manipulations resulted in the deaths of the key people responsible for the town's development, including the mayor, and of course narcotics officer Gucci, enticing them into his service by means of incorporating PTV and using his connections throughout the cult to spread it throughout the entire town. And yet the tragedy of his situation is that for all of Dr. Kaufman's manipulations, he too was sacrificed by the cult once they no longer had a use for him, having long since played his role in keeping Alessa's physical body alive until Cheryl could return to Silent Hill. In turn, we also have Lisa Garland, a victim of Dr. Kaufman's manipulations via his usage of PTV to entice her into his service. But anyway, she was also twisted into a sacrifice of her own out of kindness by Alessa Gillespie, who gave her the visage of her human form which slowly was peeling away into the monster that she always was, after Alessa was apprehended by Dahlia. In so many ways, these characters all strengthen the theme of sacrifice, and to me, this is why Silent Hill as a game I feel holds a special place in the series with far greater importance than simply being the first game in the series. Its core strength is its use of fear of the unknown, but what gives it its staying power is its ability to use the theme of sacrifice in a way in which it affects Harry's development as he comes across to lose the only thing that he had ever cared about. Silent Hill might not be a game that most fans hold in such high regard compared to its successors. However, for what it represented in the story told about Alessa's plight and sacrifice, it's one that I do feel certainly held an emotional blow with her tale of selfless sacrifice. And so, with all that said, I am Skully, keeping new metal, and depending upon the circumstances and how well this turns out, next time we'll be taking a look at Silent Hill 2. Catch you later.